Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. I have the pleasure of discussing the impact of COVID-19 on business valuations and this concept called EBITDAC, so EBITDA with a C, with Achille Ekeu, a business valuation expert in Washington, DC. Then we have the impact of the pandemic on risk, or the discount rate, or a capitalization rate. A lot of people know it by different terms.
Right.
But talk about how it's affecting the risk.
Right. So the risk of an organization include external risk and internal risk. So external risk are risk to the industry that the company is involved in, risk to the economy, in the economy, nationwide, the economy of your state or your region. So those risks, those external risks are risks that you cannot control. A business owner cannot control those risks, but the business owner has to try to use that and try to find ways to mitigate those risks in his company. But there are also internal risks. So internal risk are risks that are related to the internal operations of the business, including, for example, customer diversification. If you don't have enough customer diversification, that could be an internal risk. If you also have, let's say, one key person that is working for your business, that if that person is sick, then you can't run your business anymore. That is a high risk as well. So those are type of internal risk. So when those two are combined and then added to the impact of COVID, which creates even more uncertainties and more risk, then the impact on valuation is really, very hard. So the higher the risk, the less the value for a company. So if your company is very risky, the value of a company is going to go down. This is why it's important to really have a good understanding of those risks and try to find ways to handle them in a way that will save your company's value.
Yeah, and I think that people don't always understand how we look at risk. And if we look at a discount rate or a cap rate, we're going to build it up, right? And we're going to build it up with a risk-free rate, which is lower now. We're going to build it up with an equity rate or an equity risk premium, which is lower now. So in theory, there's less risk, right? Because interest rates are lower, but the company-specific risk, or the risk having to do with that particular company, is higher. So it's sort of like you would think that the risk would go down, but that doesn't make logical sense because we're in the middle of a pandemic.
That's right.
And so the reality is it's really risk related to that specific company that is exponentially going up, even when the other rates are going down, which it's also, it just makes our job a little bit more interesting and difficult, right?
Absolutely. Very challenging. So that's why we have to take into account. And, you mentioned earlier that since the COVID, prior December 31st, 2019, COVID was not in existence. So we cannot really count that as part of our valuation, as part of something that we can foresee, that was foreseeable or known or knowable at the time of the valuation. So that's why when an expert does a valuation, he has to pay attention to the date of the valuation. He has to make sure he has a conversation with a business owner to find out what is exactly the date of the valuation. If it's, prior COVID, it's going to be different than, pre-COVID. So, then after COVID. So it's going to be something that they would have to figure out first. And then based on the answer of the owner, then they will decide what is it that they need to do. But that is the first thing they need to do, find out of the date of the valuation.
Well, and I think the concept of known and knowable is an important one. And so the only analogy that I can give is if on January 2nd of 2020, your business, building, everything burnt to the ground. On December 31st, you didn't know that it was going to burn to the ground. And if our valuation is as of December 31st, even if we're valuing it in March, right? So we know the building burnt to the ground. What was known or knowable as of that December 31st was that this business would just continue. We didn't know it was going to burn to the ground. And so we can't incorporate that information. And I think that that's a difficult concept to understand, because even what we knew in March about the pandemic was completely different than what we know now, right? And it's probably going to be different than what we know in 6 more months.